My first big tank was my 210-gallon tank. 5 things I wish I did first. Correctly choose the substrate I was gonna use. Because in that tank, I ended up removing the whole thing and replacing it with a new substrate. And if any of you are aware of how terrible that is to do, I had to do that. But that was only my first time doing that. I would still end up doing it later in the future anyway, so I didn't even learn my lesson the first time around. One thing I wished I had done in my big tank was correctly think about how much the cost was gonna be for the fish that were gonna be required in that tank. Especially since I went African cichlids with that tank, and they require an overstock tank to begin with at anywhere from 30 to 80 bucks a pop each fish. Not knowing how overstocked they had to be, I had no idea of how much money needed to be spent to actually overstock that tank. Since we're talking about cost, the price of equipment goes through the roof when you got a really big tank. Let's talk about lighting. If you have a 6-foot tank and you need a 6-foot light, the cost of that light is gonna be much more than any other light on a 4-foot tank or a 10-gallon or a 20-gallon. So you gotta really think about cost when you go really big. Number 4 is, I really didn't think about the amount of maintenance that needed to be done on a big tank. You guys know I do big water changes and I do them very frequently. So I never thought about the systems that I needed to have in place in order to do that efficiently. So at first, I was breaking my back with the buckets in and out, like most of us do, old school time. But eventually I learned to get a water pump, I learned to use big totes, and I got a little bit better, more efficient at doing these big water changes. But knowing that in the beginning would have been very helpful. Getting a big tank requires big filtration. And if you don't know how to deal with big filtration, I, for example, was very intimidated with canister filters. And at the time, I knew that that was the best bet. But if I had more information at the time, maybe I would have went with a sump that would have been a little bit less maintenance, and that would have been the better route to go. But not being aware of all that right off the jump, and you just go canisters without thinking about it, might have been something to think about.